Part II, the arsenal definitions as weapons. Part II, the arsenal definitions as weapons. In August 1998 in Washington, the President of the United States gave a videotaped deposition in the matter of Jones v. Clinton. He had previously denied, under oath, having had a sexual relationship with a White House intern named Monica Lewinsky. He was now being asked by a grand jury to explain how this earlier denial could be reconciled with the physical evidence, the dress, the recordings, the testimony of the intern herself that had emerged in the intervening months. The deposition is mostly forgotten now. One sentence survives. Asked whether his earlier denial was still operative, given everything that had since come out, the president said, "It depends on what the meaning of the word is." The sentence has been ridiculed for 25 years. It is regularly cited as the canonical example of legalistic evasion, of presidential dishonesty, of the kind of wordplay that has corroded public trust. All of these readings are correct, and yet none of them captures what is most worth attending to about the sentence. The president was, with a precision that should not be wasted, doing what every trial lawyer learns to do in their first year of practice. He was demanding a definition before granting a predicate. The original denial had used the present tense, "There is no sexual relationship." By the time of the deposition, there was no sexual relationship. It had ended months earlier. The denial, parsed against the question that had been asked at the time, depended on whether is meant is at the moment of speaking or has ever been. Two definitions were available. The president had operated on the first. The audience had heard the second. The sentence is a request that the disambiguation be performed before the president is asked to commit to the consequences. It was, in form, a perfectly valid move. It was, in deployment, a disgraceful one, because the audience was not in fact confused about what the original denial had meant, and the disambiguation was being raised in bad faith to escape consequences for a deception. But the form was correct. Almost every important argument turns on the definition of one or two key terms. Almost every important deception is a deception about which definition is in play. The reason to study the moment is not to admire the president. It is to recognize that the move he made, demand the definition before granting the predicate, is a move that good debaters use every day, and that bad debaters fail to use to their cost. The line between the legitimate use of the move and the illegitimate use is not always sharp. We will spend much of this chapter on that line. Asterisk definitions are weapons because language is structured around category boundaries, and category boundaries are where most disputes actually live. We saw this in Chapter 2 in the discussion of stasis. The definition stasis is the most common stasis in serious disagreement, and the participants in the disagreement frequently do not realize that this is the stasis they are on. They argue at the level of consequence, was the action good or bad, when the actual unsettled question is at the level of definition, was the action the kind of thing the rule applies to? When you are aware that a dispute is at definition stasis, 4 moves become available to you. They are the 4 moves of definitional combat. I will name them in order of power. The first is the definition demand. You ask the opponent for their working definition of the load-bearing term, and you do not proceed with substantive argument until they have given it. This is the simplest move and the one most amateur debaters skip. They allow the opponent to deploy a term, racism, capitalism, consent, freedom, moksha, without committing to a specific working definition, and they then attempt to argue against the deployment without first pinning the deployment to a specific meaning. This is hopeless. The opponent will, when pressed, retreat to whichever definition serves them in the moment, and you will find yourself attacking a target that moves between sentences. A definition demand stops the motion. It says, "Before we go further, what specifically do you mean by this term?" It is asked in good faith, you genuinely want the answer, and it commits the opponent to a specific working version that can then be examined. The second move is the definition cage. Once the opponent has committed to a working definition, you examine the consequences of that definition. You identify what their definition entails, what it excludes, and where its boundaries fall. You then construct, from these consequences, a sequence of small commitments that the definition forces them to accept, and you wait to see whether the sequence terminates in a position they can defend. Often it does not. Their working definition, examined for its consequences, requires them to accept things they did not realize it required. The cage is built by their own definition. They cannot escape it without abandoning the definition, and abandoning the definition costs them the term. The third move is the stipulative refusal. When an opponent attempts to deploy a definition that preloads the conclusion, racism is the structural maintenance of white supremacy, capitalism is the system that allows wealth to be earned through honest work, freedom is the absence of coercion by the state, you refuse the definition. Not by counterattacking it, which is a different move. By refusing to accept that the definition is the only available one, and proposing your own stipulative working definition for the duration of this argument. I'll work with the term defined as X for now, and we can debate the definitions separately if you want to. But this argument is going to use the definition I just gave. The stipulative refusal preserves your right to argue without granting that the opponent's loaded definition is the natural one. The fourth move is the equivocation trap. You catch the opponent shifting between two senses of the same term within a single argument. The shift is what philosophers call an equivocation, the same word, used in two different meanings within a single argument, allowing an inference to be drawn from one sense to the other when the inference is only valid within a single sense. Equivocations are everywhere in public discourse. Most of them are unintentional. Some are deliberate. All of them are catchable by anyone paying attention to what specific meaning each instance of the term is carrying. When you catch one, you name it. I notice you use the term X first to mean A, and then to mean B. The inference you just drew is only valid under one of these meanings, and your case requires the other. The opponent has to either retreat to one meaning, which collapses part of their argument, or deny the shift, which exposes them to a clean rebuttal you have just set up. These are the four moves. They look procedural. They are devastating. Most of the most consequential public arguments of the past century have turned on one of them. In approximately 800 CE in central India, an 8-day debate began with a definition demand. We have walked through the Mandana debate in earlier chapters, and we will study it in detail in Fight Breakdown 2. Here, I want to focus on a single move, the move with which Shankara opened the engagement. After the costly signal opening, after the acknowledgement of the ritual machinery, after the frame of we are both committed to moksha, the question is what produces it. Shankara asked Mandana what moksha was. This is the definition demand. Mandana was a Mimamsa philosopher. He was committed by his school to specific things about moksha. He could not give an idiosyncratic definition. He had to give the standard definition that the Mimamsa tradition shared with the Vedanta tradition and with most of the major Indian philosophical schools. He gave the standard definition. Moksha is nitya, eternal, not bound by time, akarana, uncaused, not produced by anything, and aparikina, unconditioned, not bounded by limits. This is uncontroversial Indian philosophy. Mandana would have looked foolish denying any of the three. He gave the definition. Shankara accepted it. This is the moment the cage closed, though Mandana would not realize it for 2 days. By accepting the definition, Mandana had committed to 3 propositions: that moksha is eternal, that moksha is uncaused, and that moksha is unconditioned. Each of these propositions, on its own, is unobjectionable. Their joint implication is fatal to the Mimamsa thesis. The joint implication: if moksha is eternal and moksha is uncaused, then nothing in time, nothing that has a beginning, nothing produced by some prior cause can be moksha. Karma, the Mimamsa's central category, is by definition something that has a beginning. It is produced by action and operates in time. The karmic mechanism unfolds over moments and lifetimes. Therefore, karma cannot produce moksha. Anything karma produces will be something with a beginning and a temporal duration, that is, something not eternal, and therefore by definition not moksha. The Mimamsa school, on its own definition of moksha, cannot consistently hold that ritual action produces moksha. The definition makes the position internally inconsistent. Shankara did not state this on the first day. He did not need to. He let Mandana deploy the position over the next 2 days, and on the third day he asked the second question, can anything that is produced be eternal? And the cage was visible. By day 4, Mandana was attempting to defend the position by introducing intermediate stages. Ritual produces chitta-shuddhi, which then produces moksha, and Shankara's response was simply to apply the same definition to the intermediate stage. Chitta-shuddhi, being produced by ritual, is itself in time. It is therefore not moksha. It is, at most, a precondition. The cage closed twice. By day 8, Mandana had conceded. The entire 8-day debate is reducible to a definition cage built in the first hour. The substance was the consequence of the definition, not its source. Shankara had won the encounter by getting Mandana to commit to a definition whose consequences Mandana had not fully reckoned with. This is what the definition cage looks like at the highest level of the art. Almost every major contemporary debater you can name uses the definition demand routinely. Watch any sustained interview of any sophisticated public arga, Hitchens, Murray, Sowell, Peterson, Wilson, Dawkins, Sam Harris, Coleman Hughes, and you will see within the first 10 minutes of any substantive conversation at least one moment in which the arga asks the interlocutor to define a term before proceeding. The demand is sometimes phrased politely, can you say a little more about what you mean by X? And sometimes phrased directly, what's your working definition of X? And sometimes phrased as a setup, I want to make sure we are using the same word the same way, how are you using X? The variations are stylistic. The function is identical. The function is to pin the floating signifier to a specific working definition before it can do further work in the argument. Bad debaters routinely allow their opponents to deploy floating signifiers. They argue about racism without asking what specifically the opponent means by the term. They argue about freedom without asking which sense of freedom the opponent's case relies on. They argue about fairness, equality, justice, democracy, truth, science, load-bearing abstract nouns, every one of which carries multiple incompatible working definitions in contemporary discourse, without ever pinning the deployment. They lose when they lose, in part because the opponent can shift definitions between paragraphs, and any rebuttal they offer addresses one definition while the opponent has moved to another. The fix is not difficult. It is the discipline of demanding the definition every time a load-bearing term is deployed. The discipline is uncomfortable for the first month. The opponent will be frustrated. The conversation will feel slower. The pace of points scored per minute will fall. After a month, the discipline becomes automatic. After 3 months, the discipline is invisible. The demand happens in a single phrase. The opponent gives the definition, and the argument proceeds at full speed within the disambiguation. After a year, you are a different debater than you were before. The cage builder is a half-hour of preparation before any serious encounter. The half-hour is worth disproportionately more than any equivalent half-hour spent on substantive research. The reason is that the cage targets the structural weakness of the opponent's position, and structural weaknesses do not yield to substantive ammunition. They yield only to the construction that exposes them. A note on the ethics of this, because it is the chapter where the question first arises sharply. The 4 moves of definitional combat can be deployed in good faith or in bad. In good faith, the moves clarify, they identify the actual disagreement, They prevent the opponent from arguing against an interpretation you did not hold. In bad faith, the moves obfuscate. They exploit the opponent's good faith use of natural language to score procedural victories that do not advance the truth. The Clinton deposition is the canonical bad faith deployment. The line between the two is not always easy to draw. There are deployments that are technically valid and yet feel slippery. There are deployments that feel rough and are in fact precisely correct. A working test, which I have found useful: would you be comfortable having your move quoted in a public summary of the argument by a fair-minded observer without further explanation? If yes, the move is in good faith territory. If no, if the move requires elaborate justification to defend after the fact, the move is in territory you should not be operating in. We will return to this question repeatedly throughout the book. Definitional combat is one of the places where the ethics of debate become sharpest. The moves are powerful enough to misuse. The misuse is corrosive enough to matter. For now, the moves are part of the arsenal. Learn them, deploy them carefully.